thousands of years ago, they were Apollo, Zeus, Ares. Now they are Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and the other heroes and villains of DC and Marvel Comics. Join us every week as we discuss the legendary stories, characters, concepts, and other parts of comics as we examine the modern pantheon of heroes. Let's get heroic. Welcome to Under Two Capes, the podcast for the comic book fan. Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared.
And I'm Lad.
All right. Now, those of you that know me know that I'm a nerd. That's why I got this podcast where we talk about comic books all day. But there's another fandom that I'm a huge nerd about, and that's Halo. And I discovered that Marvel apparently did Halo comics back in the day. So I figured we have to do a story about it. Now, to address this monumental topic, there's a guy I know who is just about as big of a Halo nerd as I am a DC Comics nerd. And that is my good friend Logan. Logan, how are ya?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Welcome to the show. All right. So I have a couple of questions for you that I ask every one of my guests. So, favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero?
Yeah.
Probably have to be Hulk.
All right, that's
a big fan of the Hulk.
Favorite Halo character?
You know me, I'm a huge sucker for George 052.
All right, that's good. That's good. And Lad, that will be explained as we get into the episode on who George is. All right, favorite superhero movie?
Superhero movie. Ooh, I'm gonna have to. I'm a big fan of Civil War.
That's a good one.
Big fan of. Oh yeah.
Favorite Halo game?
Halo Reach all the way.
Halo 5, yep. Guardians.
Lad, you haven't even played Halo 5 Guardians. All right, but yeah. So, how did you get into Halo?
Well, my first exposure was at a doctor's appointment. They had it at the on one of the TVs, and I ended up playing it. But that was when I was really young, before I really understood what I was doing. That was my first exposure. When I really started playing it and getting into the games, actually was. I forget how old I was, but you and I actually, you got me really into it.
Yeah, I thought you were in your teens, I think, because I met you when you were like 13,
12 or
right?
13.
Yeah,
you met me when
there.
I was 8.
I did?
Yeah, it was right around because it was right around the time I got diagnosed.
Oh wow! All right. Well, anyway.
How can you forget?
Lad, I know so many people that it just bleeds together at this point.
Oh man.
Quite literally.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
Whoa.
All right, that's a good one. All right. Now, all right. So how did you get into comics?
Comics? I've always been kind of nerdy. So I just, really. Anyway, I usually just sort of don't really know when, don't really know how. I was never really the sports kind of person. So comics, video games, action figures were kind of my realm that I got really involved in.
That's good. That's me too. All right. So let's get into our comic we're covering today. We're covering Halo: The Fall of. Oh,
I think we. Sorry, I feel rudely interrupt, but I think we need to preface this by saying that I am not the biggest.
He's a Halo initiate. He's an initiate.
I am a tier 1 recruit. I am the spotter that gets thrown into battle first and gets taken
He's a
out.
grunt, essentially.
I'm a grunt, yes. So I've played a few games with Jared. He's trained me a little bit.
He played Reach and won. Actually, I don't think you've even completed one yet.
No, I completed
You
Halo
stop
Reach.
at the library.
No, we haven't. We had just landed on the Halo ring, I think.
Yeah, we just landed on the
so
Halo
you're
ring.
on like Halo. You're on the second mission. Dang. All right.
Yeah, we're pretty.
Nice.
I'm pretty far behind. I'm catching up. But I'm getting there. I am a bit traitorous. I do backstab Jared quite often, which could be part of the reason
can't even count.
It is always the fun part, though. I will tell
Logan,
you that.
I can't even count how many times I've been walking. I've been taking point, and all of a sudden he throws a plasma grenade at me and sticks to my head and kills us both.
Well, if I'm gonna be honest, I can't count the many times that I've done that as well.
He shot me with a rocket Logan has shot me with a rocket like many times, okay? So
hey, what can I say? It's fun.
All right.
So in relation to the story of Reach, lad, this is taking place like immediately before Halo Reach. Well, not really immediately, but many years before that. All right. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out Marvel did Halo comics. I was like, oh, really?
Wow.
All right.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that those two worlds kind of intertwine at some point.
Can you imagine if the Master Chief was hanging out with Iron Man?
Well, I feel like Iron Man his head be too big.
All right. So basically, to give you a background on the story, it's in the Halo games take place in the 2500s, and humanity is like expanded into the stars. And
Rogers in the 25th century,
kind of
26th, isn't it?
20. Oh yes, it's the 26th century because time works that way. But
right.
But so humanity is currently involved in, I guess, a space civil war against the insurrectionists. It's not going so well for the United Nations Space Command, otherwise known as the UNSC. It's about the only useful thing the United Nations has ever created.
Will create.
Ever will create. Yeah, I know. All right. So anyway, so Bootcamp opens up during a space battle in which one of the rebels, their fleets are pulling away from a planet as the UNSC forces show up. They have this awesome space battle, and then and then the rebels escape into slip space, which basically slip space is analogous to when they go into hyperspace in Star Wars, lad. So pretty much just assume they're going to hyperspace.
Traveling at the speed of light, pretty much, or very, very close in order to achieve high speeds.
Okay. So like warp speed.
Yes, exactly.
All
that kind of faster than light travel. Basically.
Got it.
All right. So 4 years after the battle, Lieutenant Jacob Keyes, he's a important Halo character, is woken from cryosleep on he's part of a security detail on the diplomatic shuttle called the Han, and he's escorting Dr. Catherine Halsey of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Lad, do you know who Halsey is?
Halsey. Do you mean the singer? No. I learned about Halsey. I vaguely remember that name from somewhere.
She was in Reach, so you'd better have remembered.
She was briefly in Reach. She did play
was she the scientist?
Kind of crucial role.
Yeah, she was a scientist. Yeah, the white-haired scientist that was always being a kind of snippy to the Spartans.
Okay, yeah, got it. Now I remember.
All right, so he's like, okay, so if this is a diplomatic mission, why you have a naval officer with you instead of just a diplomatic pilot? So he finally figures out this is a recon mission. So they set down on the planet Eridanus 2. And Halsey explains that her mission is to scout out a series of children for a top secret project. Now, this project is pretty key to the Halo universe, wouldn't you say, Logan?
I'd say it's one of the penultimate stories of the Halo universe, one of the top stories. I mean, even considered legend in the canon itself.
Yep. All right. So she finds this little boy named John who's playing King of the Hill with the other boys in school. So she's supposed to scout out John for recruitment. He's candidate 117 out of a list of, I think, 150, right, Logan?
I want to say something like 150. Yeah, because I think, yes, I believe it is.
I think her original list was like 300, but the final list that she decided to recruit was down to 150.
And there is even a legitimate reason for the original list being 300, as we'll discover later.
Oh, okay.
You know what's kind of funny, Logan? I just realized what you just meant by that, and I was like, oh, I never thought of that.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. All right. So she interacts with the kid, with baby John. He'll be important, very important later, like extremely important.
Oh,
like yeah, extremely, like top of the
your
line,
Star Wars one for your Star Wars fans. He's kind of a chosen one, if you will.
Oh, so Rey Skywalker.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Please, don't
oh,
kick me off the podcast.
Oh boy.
Forgive me.
Finally, I have someone on my side. All right. So anyway, so she takes a
Logan,
coin.
I do this all the time. I really get under.
He annoys me. That's what he does. He annoys me. We have a backlog of episodes of him telling me about how Halle Berry's Catwoman is the best.
Ooh.
Adam West.
That. Ooh.
All right. Back to the story. So Halsey takes out a coin and goes, okay, so we're going to play a game. I'm going to flip the coin and you have to tell me what head's going to be face up. And John correctly guesses it every single time.
You would say that would be quite lucky, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So finally, then some time passes, and then Halsey's in orbit on a space station aboard the planet Reach, another very important planet. And she finally has her list of actually, the original list was wait. All right, so 150. Oh yeah, and then her list of 150 was further whittled down to 75 kids.
Yes.
And that's why you can have people whose number was like above 75s, because the original list was much larger than 75.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Because it's based off of their candidate number rather than their enlistment number.
All right. So then, so she gives the order, and the Office of Naval Intelligence, which is analogous to our CIA, kidnaps these kids and replaces them with clones. Now, Logan, do you want to explain to Lad the thing about these clones?
So these clones are accelerated. So normally a clone would, have a normal life, but because they're using these clones to switch the location of the original child with the clone, they have to not only accelerate the age of these clones, making them equivalent to the 6 years old that these children already are, but then they also have to implant them with memories of these that these children already have. And as you can tell, that probably doesn't do great with the genetics. So these clones usually were actually designed to die, to make it so that as if these children, weren't still around, even though they really are a part of Halsey's program. But because this program is so top secret, no one can really know what happened. So they have to, in a way, get rid of the children to make it that their stories are over, whereas their stories really aren't, that just no one knows about it.
So it's at this point that we're showing snapshots of some of the really key kids, and that would be John 117, Linda 058, Kelly 087, and Sam 034. And they would all form a very tight-knit friendship. Really, all the Spartans are really tight-knit, but
these are even these stand out among the crowd as the top tier, the elite of the elite, the best of the best of the best, if you will.
The best. All right. So
Yeah.
basically, all these kids are brought into an auditorium and said, "Guess what? You're in the military now. You are sort of conscripted into the program Spartan 2."
Wow.
So basically, these kids go to bed, and as they're sleeping, Halsey receives basically a voicemail from a doctor on another space station, and he's telling her. So Halsey had sent this particular doctor, Dr. Jeremy, like proposed experimentation on chimpanzees. Now this proposed experimentation will be important. She's saying it's proposed because it's a cover, but it's basically a way to augment these chimpanzees.
Monkeys?
Basically make them better,
stronger and all that stuff. Yeah.
Better, stronger, faster than normal genetics, normal human ability would allow.
Now, all right, so the kids wake up and they're basically in the middle of BUDS training. And for those of you that don't know, BUDS is the basic underwater demolition SEAL training, which is basically the training to become a Navy SEAL. So they put these kids through pretty much the worst parts of boot camp.
And you also have to remember that, I mean, you know, people are usually 18 or older going through those kinds of trainings. These children are only 6 years old. So think of like a kindergartner going through Navy SEAL training, to put it really into perspective.
Wow.
That's pretty much what that is. This training is pretty much we expect you to die because of this training, but we don't care.
Oh boy.
It's trained drill sergeants, top of the line drill sergeants, training 6-year-olds
So to get an idea, lad, go onto YouTube when we're done here and just Google Marine Corps drill sergeants, and then just imagine that, except to 6-year-olds.
Wow. 6-year-olds who were, just a day before stolen from their families, ripped from their lives.
Literally a day before.
Literally, quite literally the day before.
Whoa.
All right. So then they're brought into a nice classroom that's air conditioned. They're given food. So they're like, "Oh, this is great." And they're like, class is about to start. And everyone's like, So then an artificial intelligence named
Deja, I believe it is.
Yeah, Deja starts telling him about the story of the 300 Spartans of Thermopylae. And this is what I think Logan was referring to when he said the original number was 300. Is this what you were referring to, Logan?
Yes, it actually was, because
well done, sir.
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I was so basically, lad, do you know the basic story of 300?
I only know, this is Sparta kick into the thing. I don't really know the rest of it though.
Basically what it is, it's the story about how Xerxes assembled a massive fleet and he was going to invade Greece. So the Spartan king Leonidas assembled 300 of his best guys, trained since they were 6 years old, and they held off the Persian army, numbering in the millions, for 3 days.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. So
eventually they prevailed.
Odds.
Yeah.
They won in the end, or they lost?
They kind of won at the end. I mean, they all died, but ultimately, Xerxes was defeated.
That's awesome.
Yes.
All right. So
it was holding them off so that everyone else could prepare and fight back as well, I believe.
I see.
So then the comic cuts to a supply ship that's being boarded by insurrectionists. This is basically to show what the insurrectionists are doing around this point, about how they're getting desperate as well. Just it's a fight for resources. And then we cut back to Reach, to our favorite childcare program. Can you imagine if this was a real childcare program?
Yeah, these people would actually be in jail. I mean, it's a
so what they're doing in this exercise. What they're doing in this, actually, Logan, do you want to explain what they're doing in this exercise?
All right. So in this exercise, they are being taken to a wilderness training preserve on Planet Reach, and each child is given a piece of the map, a map of the area below them. And what they're told to do is to meet up, or they're told basically not even to meet up, they're just told to get to the extraction point, and the last person to get there has to walk back to the military complex, which is several days away. And you think it's still 6-year-olds. They're each given a different piece. So it's not like they're all given a map. They're all given a different piece and told to find their way out. So what they're tasked with getting out, getting back to safety for a Pelican dropship, which is their form of travel most times within this, to be taken back to base. So what happens in the exercise is John notices a kind of a landmark that he's able to use to kind of group up everyone.
Yeah,
From
it's
there,
a river.
a river, yes, that leads into a lake, I believe. Yes. So he's sent out first, and he talks to Sam, and it's like, hey, Sam, pass the word along, meet there. So they all meet together and with their pieces of the map and realize that some pieces are the same and some pieces don't even belong. And they end up finding where the extraction point is. So they all go together and they end up finding it and realize that where they're supposed to be extracting, there are guards that don't look like their drill sergeant's men, Chief Mendez's men. So then they're trying to figure out what to do, but then they remember a lesson that Deja, the artificial intelligence, gave them earlier, which was to think like wolves. You know, one wolf is a formidable enemy against a foe its size, but if you put a wolf against a elk or a moose or something, the wolf will usually lose. But wolves being pack animals, if they work together, they can take down something much larger than them. And you have to remember, these children were sent into this forest unarmed.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, and
Against
these
guys
men
that
are armed.
that are likely either using live ammo in their ARs or they're using shock batons.
Which both can deal serious damage to a 6-year-old. So what they do is they send, I believe it's Kelly out, isn't it?
Yeah, what happens is first Sam fakes a knee injury, and then Kelly goes and says, help, 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 my friend hurt his knee. So the guards send one of their guys, and then when he's isolated, the Spartans start throwing rocks at him and like completely pummel the guy. Then all of a sudden his friends show up, and then it is like it's raining rocks at that point.
Mm-hmm. And so then at that point, Deja, during the lesson, they then realize, well, we've heard two different opposing stories that one, numbers don't matter. And here's this other opposing story that numbers do matter. So, you'd be thinking like, well, which one really matters? And in the end, I believe Deja says that, or John actually explains the lesson is the fact that it's not really a matter of whether or not, your numbers can take them out. It's whether you can work cohesively enough to take out the opponent despite what circumstance you may be in.
That's cool.
Which was one of the lessons of that particular training
operation.
Exercise.
So
exactly.
ultimately they all get home. No one's forced to walk home. John is explaining to Mendez and Halsey what he did and why he acted in that manner, and they actually make him squad leader of all the Spartans. No, he goes, okay.
Yeah.
But he says, okay, they actually tell him you actually may not be able to get everyone out of your next mission. So they're like, okay, so what's that next mission? And then they just say survive, because now we find out the real purpose of those experiments on monkeys.
The chimpanzees, yes.
What those actually are is that okay, so they trained these kids, and at this point these kids were like 13, right?
12 or 13, I believe. They may have been
13.
right around their teenage years. Yes.
Yeah, so these kids are teenagers now. They've been trained for a long time, but now they're told, okay, so we're going to genetically augment your bodies to make you hit harder, run faster, see farther, and all the other
to become the perfect soldier.
Now, half of that class of 75 kids either die or wash out. So roughly now the Spartan program of 75 kids is down to 36, roughly.
Whoa.
Roughly.
This is before the serum or after the serum?
After the serum. It's not even. This
is the final product.
They wish it were just a serum.
Wow.
I mean,
it's like they coat their bones in metal. They like screw around with their eyesight so they can see in the dark. There's like lots of.
If this is a little bit off topic, but if you've ever seen Halo Nightfall, there is a former Spartan 2 in that, who's on one of these planets, and you can just see, I mean, not in armor, just a regular kind of like
regular dude, and you can just see his body. I mean, he was a Spartan. He did go out on the field, but he eventually retired, and you can just see his body is just mangled. I mean, he has scars everywhere from. Yeah, this screwed up a lot of people to the point where some of the washouts couldn't even control their own bodies. It got
had to
like
be
really
bad. Not basically, I believe, gel tanks. I mean, just in constant suspension. Yeah.
One of them did return later on in the Halo lore, but that's besides the point. All right. So now Mendez and John have a very important discussion. Now the Master Chief goes, okay, so my mission was to survive, but some of my team died. What could I have done to make this better? And first off, Mendez is like, listen, dude, the very fact that even some of you people survived this is like huge.
It's a miracle.
But then he gives John a very important lesson. He says a leader has to be prepared to spend lives. He can't waste them. He has to spend them. And what I always thought he was saying is that if you have to lose men, make it count and make it worth something. In other words, don't waste it.
Don't make their lives be sacrificed in vain type thing.
It's kind of like in Halo Reach when George dies, he goes, tell him to make it count.
Exactly. It's sacrificing yourself for the greater good type thing.
All right, so next, so the Spartans had to recover from their surgeries. Obviously, a lot of them had to relearn how to move.
I have a quick question, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are like these Spartans now? They're like 13 or I don't know what age, around that age or something. Are they like okay with the whole program? Like, are they like actually like we have to train to like protect the galaxy or something?
That's
or
another
they still,
reason
like we shouldn't be here.
That's another reason why they recruited them so young, because they could also indoctrinate the kids to want to be in this sort of
they hadn't made significant enough attachments in their lives. The only ones they really had were their, because that's why they did it before quote unquote school age or around that, because then the child isn't old enough to understand which a lot of this sounds extremely dark, but that's because it really is. I believe they've called it a necessary evil in the story.
Halo's all about that moral gray area on what you're going to do to accomplish a mission,
what you're going to do to succeed and persevere. It's whether or not you sacrifice ethics to survive in the end, facing an odds that you may or may not either way.
All right. So anyway, so the kids recover and they're brought to a bunker on Reach. that they use. Actually, it's not even a bunker. I think it's an old titanium mine.
It's an old titanium mine that was being used for storage.
Yeah. So what Halsey sees is like, what's that armor in the corner? And it's like this Mark I power armor. It's basically like Iron Man armor, except the thing is it basically has to be plugged into a wall at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Okay.
yeah, I know it's hilarious. But anyway, so she asks, so what's this armor for? So she says, the people who are training the Spartans, they have to wear that for their own protection now, because let me put it this way, lad. If a Spartan punches you in the face at this point in their lives, their fist will go right through your head like it's butter.
I mean, there were ODSTs, which are orbital drop shock troopers, which are basically what were as good as the top dogs, and now the Spartans are.
They were basically, lad. Think of ODSTs pre-Spartans as SEAL Team 6.
Yes, and then you've got the Spartans coming in that kind of even go above that. But either way,
next level.
Bringing it back to the point Jared just made was the fact that, I mean, this child was, what was he at that point in the boxing ring? Was he still
14.
6 or was he was 14 at that time? I mean, these were grown adults, grown trained adults. I mean, John, being an augmented Spartan, he took down all 4 of them, 4 grown adults as a 14-year-old.
Yeah,
in a matter of seconds.
One died. One was paralyzed from the waist down,
and none of them went away unscathed. I mean, all of them had severe injuries. I mean, broken bones, broken ribs, broken spines, and even death. And this wasn't even, I mean, this was post-augmentation, obviously, but I mean, he didn't have, any armor. He didn't have any modifications to himself besides his augmentations. I mean, Spartans without their armor are still highly lethal, highly not destructive, but just
probably
basically ruthless. Yeah. I mean,
so anyway,
killing machines.
So Halsey goes, okay, so I want a demonstration of what my work can do. So basically, Mendez goes into one of the mines and goes, capture the flag. So basically, the guards are the trainers are guarding a flag. They're in the power armor, and then all of a sudden these Spartans attack, and it's like over in less than like 5 seconds, pretty much, right, Logan? It's like really fast.
Even in this armor, and I don't know, are they using live rounds in this?
I don't think they are at this point. Well, maybe either way, yet. I mean, looking at the comic panel, it does kind of look like it.
I mean,
who knows?
You can clearly see in one of the panels, I mean, Kelly is outrunning these people in this armor, and she is very clearly one of the fastest, which she is.
But she is. She there's a reason why they call her the rabbit.
There is. She is. I mean, even without her armor, she is the fastest among all of them, and the armor only adds to that.
So Halsey goes, okay, have John assemble a team of his best. Time for a real life operation.
Well,
so even Mendez is like, wait, what? So they're like, okay, so you're going into so your mission is to capture Colonel Robert Watts, the leader of the insurrectionists. So what they track him to this asteroid field and said, okay, normally it would take us like a lifetime to comb through these asteroids. So what you're going to do, we've identified one ship called the Logan, which is making a delivery of goods to Watts's base. So you're going to stow away on the ship, have all your gear with you, get Watts, and then extract any way you can. So basically, they go in without any support or anything like that.
They do have, I believe it says in here that they have a help button, but if things get hot, that they're going to be on their own. So if something were to happen beforehand where the mission was compromised, they could maybe get out before, but if not, then I mean they're on their own once things get hot.
Yeah. So anyway, so they get on there, and first off, now John is given an actual rank. He's a petty officer, 3rd class, which is pretty high up there. Well, actually, it's not really that high up there. If you look, it's not that low if you look at the Navy ranking structure.
Got it.
So they're on the ship, and Kelly is doing a little inventory because she basically jokes around and says the security here is a joke. I mean, the password's probably 1, 2, 3, 4,
or its password,
right, exactly. But she goes, okay, so there are some items here. It's like a lot of luxury items like wine and chocolates going to one particular address. So they probably figure that's Watts. So the ship lands, they hop out, and then so they have the crate of luxury goods, and they sneak past the guards in the elevator by posing as dock workers. But the guards like, someone will have to tell to eventually tell these guys they don't have to be paranoid anymore, because there's no way that anyone's ever going to sneak into this building. All right, now we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back soon, and we will continue this discussion.
We'll be back after these messages.
And we're back. All right. So spoiler alert, they sneak into the building. Pretty easily, as a matter of fact. And in their, what's kind of interesting is that they're dressed as dock workers, and they're basically carrying a bunch of duffel bags, and then come to find out it's got like a bunch of guns and like tactical gear in there. And I'm like, these guards never said, okay, open up your bag so I can make sure you're not carrying in a weapon.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
I mean, even like TSA does better than that.
I know, right? What's kind of funny, Logan, is that if you look at the design of the armor, it's pretty much ODST armor.
I mean, it's clearly not just, it's clearly not dock working armor. It's clearly,
very clearly.
Oh, they don't have a disguise on them. They're just like
military grade armor.
Well, they had like blue coveralls over their work clothes, if you will.
They did, but they didn't have to go through any metal detectors or anything. Seriously, it's that lax there, man.
I know. Wow.
People are, they're very trusting. They're nice bad guys.
Well, they're probably also thinking, well, who's gonna find us? We're in an asteroid field.
Yeah. All right. So then what happens is they breach the door, and then John actually gets shot.
Does it's while he's pushing Sam out of the way, because Sam was actually about to get shot before him.
He was. And then we have a flashback scene to when to their training, and Mendez basically has a bunch of guards with paintball guns like on the walls, and has the trainees run around, and then goes, if you have one speck of paint on your clothes by the end of this exercise, I will have you doing push-ups until you puke. So pretty much a Marine Corps drill sergeant. So then back into the modern day, the Spartans stabilize John and keep his guts where they're supposed to be, to quote Kelly. Then they breach Watts' safe room and actually throw him in the cargo crate.
Well,
they're giving him the royalty treatment there. So they do something that I'm still doubting the wiseness of this action. They throw the crate off a window, and they're pretty much at the top floor of a building.
Yeah, I mean, it says
how padded is that crate?
I don't know. All I know is they said before it could survive the vacuum of space, so maybe it's pretty cozy in there. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But anyway, so they managed to extract out by first. So their plan is that, okay, so in our spacesuit we could look like dock workers who have spacesuits on that happen to have our numbers on them. But anyway, so John sends two of his guys to secure a drop ship so they can get out, and then sends Sam to open the cargo bay door through explosives, which is always
best
a fun
way to do it.
Yeah, but anyway, so they breach. So they everyone loads up in the Pelican, the Pelican dropship, and Sam blows the door open, and then they all get out. Now they think everything's all good here. They think, okay, we just cut the head off the insurrection. It's all good now. We can rest now. All right. So they receive a visitor by top UNSC brass named Vice Admiral Stanforth and the AI Beowulf. And he's telling him, okay, so we have this planet called Harvest. It's a standard mining colony. It's a very peaceful place, not a lot of issues. Then it discovers this object, and he shows a picture of an alien spacecraft and goes, okay, all contact was lost shortly thereafter. We sent a scout ship, which was then lost. And then we sent a battle group, which is basically a bunch of heavily armed ships. What they saw was that the surface of Harvest was burnt to ash.
Oh, boy.
Like burnt to the point where the surface was glass.
I mean, it's bad. And you have to think that was a major farming colony as well. I mean, Harvest was a major farming colony for the UNSC. I mean, and it was fertile. It was a very lush, nutrient-rich, beautiful place. And now it's reduced to nothing but just molten glass.
So
wow.
So of the battle group that was sent, of like roughly 3 or 4 ships, one made it out because the Covenant ship the alien ship 1 had advanced shields, and 2 had advanced like a weaponry that could punch through armor in seconds. So anyway, they discover, okay, so John asked, okay, so wait, they call themselves the Covenant. And they spoke to us in English. So did we get like a translation of their language? And then the admiral was like, no, apparently they had been studying us for quite some time and learned our language. So he tells Beowulf, play the message. These guys need to know what they're about to fight. So the message is, and actually, Logan, I'll let you give the message.
So this alien says, humans, your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instrument. Very, very menacing.
So that's Bootcamp. That's Halo Bootcamp. That's where it leaves off.
Yep.
Wow.
Basically, what you just saw, lad, was the origin story for the Master Chief.
Wow, that's crazy.
That was John is the Master Chief.
So imagine, lad, imagine being taken away from your home at age 6, told, okay, so you're going to go fight in a war you've never even heard of. And by the way, all of these kids were taken from planets that were part of the rebellion. So conceivably, you're fighting your own family.
Oh, they're not even from like the United Confederation.
No, most of these are from the outer colonies.
Which are the ones that are in open rebellion in the insurgent world. They took them from the insurgent world.
Really? Wow.
Yes, they did.
Funny.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I'm like, when you think about that, it's like say that Florida ever seceded from the Union and the U.S. went to war with Florida and then conscripted us all to go fight Florida. That's pretty much what that's like.
It would, yeah. It would be exactly.
Florida exit, let's go.
But it's crazy to think, like we were talking about earlier, the morals of that, the ethics behind it, there really are none. And I mean, at a certain point, that is what it takes at a point to win, is to throw ethics out, but you also have to figure out where to draw the line.
Is it
where
calling
to
into
say
question,
this is enough?
Is it calling into question, like, is the United Federation actually like bad guys in the end, or like maybe are they wrong?
First off, it's called the UNSC. the United Nations Space Command. And yeah, at certain points, well, it's not so much the UNSC as it is the Office of Naval Intelligence, because here's the thing. The UNSC didn't know about the CD pass of the Spartan program. They just thought they just took some adult recruits, augmented them, and gave them armor and just said that that's it. They know that they were kidnapped at age 6. That was all a secret spy program.
I mean, you have to think that throughout, through the history of Halo and all the extended lore, in a comic from Halo 4, I believe it was Escalations, even the Spartan 4s don't really, they're Spartans themselves, but even they don't know, because there was, I believe it was from Fireteam Majestic, they even didn't even know the whole story. They weren't even in question. Even people on the inside.
The 4th generation of Spartans, the Spartan 4s, they were like special operations guys taken from throughout the military and just augmented and given armored suits, because at that point they could the augmentation process
at that point.
Yeah, and the augmentation process had developed to a point where an adult could survive it, because back then they picked the kids because kids have a remarkable ability to heal from lots of injuries.
Also, their bodies are more susceptible to that type of change.
So John and the gang were phase 1 then, or the first group?
No,
they were phase 2. Technically,
they were phase 2, because what happened is, okay, so the reason it's called Spartan 2 is that it's also called Orion 2, because Project Orion was UNSC's first attempt to create super soldiers. And the whole idea was, okay, so we're going to create an army of unstoppable soldiers to fight the insurrectionists, because the war was going pretty badly for the UNSC at that point. So that's why everyone just told Halsey, do whatever you have to do to give us a weapon to solve this war.
Which is something that in Halo you don't really think about, because the first time you see Chief and the first time you really hear about all he's done is through the war with the Covenant. But what you never really realize, and what, Halsey tries to explain away, is that, the Spartans were originally created to fight humans. Yes, they became helpful more when fighting the Covenant, because of their augmentations made them more of a formidable opponent to, and almost an equal in fighting to, the Covenant and their multiple races, which, yes, is helpful at that point. But you also have to think the origins weren't originally to help humanity. It was to end a human war, not a save humanity. It was a end human war type thing.
And they make this point.
I didn't know that.
They make this point in Halo 4, because the opening is Halsey's being interrogated by someone at ONI, and he's like, okay, so wait a second. So she says, my work, the Spartan program, saved the human race. And then he goes, well, wait a second. You created the Spartans to stop human rebellion, not to fight the Covenant. And then he goes, then she goes, yeah, that's true. But when the Covenant showed up, no one was concerned about why I originally made these kids.
It was, they showed as a beacon of hope. And at a certain point, parts of Spartan 2s and wasn't at a certain point part of the classifications peeled back as kind of a morale booster for humanity. So, obviously not all of the tape was taken, but most of it was, or portion of it was.
Yeah, they kind of brought in the whole idea. So they revealed to the public that these are like the greatest soldiers we have. They're recruited, they're augmented, and all that stuff. They left out the fact that they're kidnapped at age 6. This is
the public reveal is before Reach, or
this is during the Covenant War, I think.
It would have been before the Covenant War, but I think it was before the fall of Reach as well.
Yeah, it was before that. It was during that time period. So, let me think. Oh yeah, so what you were let me see, what was I gonna say? Okay.
And so they bring up this lore stuff this stuff isn't brought up in Halo 1 and Halo 2, or when do you start finding out about this, like, in the games, or, like,
a lot of this
media release-wise?
A lot of this extra stuff that we're talking about, there is stuff in the games, but I mean, first off, Blue Team that is mentioned, Kelly, Sam, Fred, Linda,
not Sam,
all of them aren't even mentioned. Well, not Sam, but Kelly, Fred, and Linda aren't even mentioned. Sam's never mentioned in the games, and Kelly, Fred, and Linda aren't mentioned until Halo 5, which is...
Yeah, Halo 5 was actually the first time they even showed up in a game.
Which led many fans to believe who had never read the books, never read the comics, never did any of the outside lore, to believe that Chief was the only one, which was misleading because from the very beginning, Fall of Reach came out at around the same time as the first game, where you see he wasn't the only one, but the game would have you believe.
Well, in their defense, the original Fall of Reach book ended kind of open-ended to the point where you could kind of get away with making the assumption that all the Spartans died except for Chief. But it wasn't until like the first Strike book that it was officially confirmed that John was not the last one.
Which was still in between Halo 1 and Halo 2, so they set that up from the get-go even.
Yeah, now, and then...
I see.
One thing the comic does not talk about that I think is important to mention is that during John's training, like during the first few exercises, he's used to being a solo act. He's not used to leading a team. So there's this point where they're playing a game where it's a race to go ring a bell, and
it's an obstacle course.
Yeah, it's basically an obstacle course, and they say at the end of it is a bell. The first team that rings it gets. The last team that rings it does not get food.
Goes hungry that night.
Yeah, so basically what they do is that so they line up, and then they say, okay, so everyone in the rows, those are your teams. So it's John, Kelly, and Sam, and they go, okay, so you're Blue Team. That's your, and then so John like blows past everyone, including his own teammates, and ring the bell. But then Mendez says, hey, if your team is not here, then you actually did not win. You don't win unless your team wins.
Because it's not a solo exercise, it's a team exercise.
Because remember, John, when Halsey first saw him, he was playing King of the Hill, which is like a supremely solo game. There's not a lot of team stuff. So John had to learn how to be a team player, and then he would grow into being this unbelievable battlefield commander, which is why he is in the Halo lore like a myth and a legend among the soldiers, even more so than the Spartans as a whole.
He rises above, even though he's on the same playing field as all the other Spartans, he's held so much higher because of the respect that he's commanded.
Plus the fact when you read a lot of the extended lore and you see the stuff that this guy's been able to pull off on the battlefield, it's pretty much like it's like essentially God on Earth fighting a war, in that it's the most impossible stuff ever happening.
But at the same time,
like
it also
single-handed or
sometimes single-handed, yeah.
Sometimes, yes, even single-handed. But a lot of it is contributed to one of his most amazing qualities, features, whatever you want to call it, which isn't a learned skill that he ever got. It isn't something he ever was taught or knew how to do. It's just he was born with an amazing sense of luck. It always seems like the sun shone on him.
Which is why when Halsey first met him and goes, okay, so here's a coin, I'm going to flip it, and you have to tell me what head it's going to land on, which is why he guessed it right every single time. Which
is usually impossible.
Really impossible.
Interesting.
It really is. I mean, she did it several.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the twice you saw in the comic. They obviously shortened it down for that, for time's sake. But it was, I mean, in the actual novel itself, she repeated the process several times. And every single time he succeeded in guessing correctly.
Wow.
And you see later on, I mean, Lad, you asked if the Spartans ever really like thought, okay, so I should be here or anything, there was this point where it's like Mendez was reassigned, and this was long after the Spartans had graduated their training, they're full-fledged battlefield soldiers. And then Mendez, and then in the Fall of each novel, not the comic, the novel, John basically thinks to himself and says, I should thank him for giving my life purpose. In other words, this is the only life these kids have ever known.
Mm-hmm.
It's really crazy when you think about it, because it's just, once again, imagine being ripped off from your home at age 6, thrown into the military, and saying you're going to go fight probably your neighbors, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh man, but
wow.
And then trust me, it only gets worse, because we're gonna cover the other two parts of these stories in our next couple of Marvel episodes. But it gets pretty crazy, because to give you a little preview, we're gonna see how the Master Chief deals with loss, because we got a certain taste of that when half of the Spartan class were either killed or like disqualified from further training because of the augmentation. But you really see how it starts to take a toll on them to a certain degree, because remember, these kids are all family. They've trained since they were 6 years old.
So they have like emotions.
Yeah.
They actually they do experience like normal human emotions and care about each other and stuff, or it's not just
to a degree. I mean, yes and no, because these kids don't really know how to have normal human relationships, because all they've known is the military. Like there is no, it's not like a soldier goes for deployment and comes home for a couple of months and goes on another deployment. No, they're constantly on deployment.
And there even in the most recent book, this isn't a spoiler or anything for anyone listening, but Chief is talking to someone, and he tries, he notices something about them that he wants to ask. And in the book, it describes how, he doesn't know how to break that social barrier. He wants to ask the question, but he wants to ask it, but he just genuinely does not know how. He doesn't know how to just ask a question. That's a crucial skill that you would learn through school and interacting with other humans, and not necessarily something that you learn on, a stressful battlefield or somewhere in a military setting. Exactly.
Which is why the Spartans pretty much only keep to themselves, because they're the only one. Because let me put it this way, they have only been, since they were 6 years old, they have only been around their other Spartans or their drill instructors and Halsey. That's it. That is it.
Exactly. Yeah, they haven't had, normal social interactions. They've had military type interactions.
So they're socially awkward then?
That's a word
quite
for
actually,
it.
Yes. Quite actually, yes.
And they talk about this in the beginning cutscene of Halo 4 again, because they talk about, because that Oni agent, when he's talking to Halsey, he goes, records show Spartans show mildly sociopathic tendencies. It's like difficulty associating with others. They're very reserved, very away from everyone else.
Just almost seems like a recluse, but in a way that's not just introverted. It's something beyond that.
I see. Because people aren't meant to be like on the battlefield from age 6. They have normal social things they learn. And,
usually you're
structure.
after. Exactly. It's usually after age 18 when, you're sort of on your own. 17 at the earliest, but usually past high school.
Yeah, pretty much.
Where, you're able to make those kinds of decisions. Think of a 6-year-old making the decisions of an 18-year-old. It just doesn't happen.
That's a recipe for destruction right there.
Exactly. It's not the quote unquote normal way of doing things. A 6-year-old is supposed to, that's the age where you're learning to read and write. That's the age where you're learning so many different things. I mean, just think of that. I mean, you're a kindergartner at that point. You are just going into school.
Yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, but when I was John's age at 6 years old, all I cared about was Where am I good? When am I sleeping and eating and playing? That's it. That's all I had to worry about. This guy's leading people into battle.
He's leading people into battle, learning about concepts you usually don't learn about until at least your high school ages. I mean, even then you may not learn about that stuff quite then. I mean, it's insane to think that 6-year-olds would be able to comprehend that.
Yeah, it's really, really crazy. And by the way, and then you see, even when Spartans retire, which rarely, if ever, happens, like extremely rare. It's like,
I believe I've only seen 2 or 3 instances. I believe
2 are known. 2 are known. One is Maria 062, and then Randall. I think it's like Randall's. Is he 303 or what was his number?
I cannot remember his number. All I know is that
it was Randall.
It was Randall. I know that. It was Randall and Maria.
He was the one in Nightfall, right?
Randall was the one in Nightfall. Maria was the one that would, she would field test later. So she'd still have a family, still be retired, but it wouldn't be a battlefield position like most Spartans. It'd be more of a field test, more of like a behind the scenes type job. She would field test newer armors.
She essentially works for UNSC DARPA.
Exactly.
Wow.
Field testing weapons, upgrades, armors.
Okay.
Just anything.
So that's basically the origins of the Spartan 2 program. Now, there's been altogether 4 Spartan programs. 3 comes later. The Spartan 3s are the ones we see in Halo Reach, lad, except for George 052. He was the only Spartan from John's class on Noble Team.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, those guys.
That's why he has. Yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Logan.
Oh, I was going to say that's why George has one, because usually the Spartan 3s have 4-digit, or they have a number in 3 digits.
Because what they do is they were brought in different companies. So you'll have like a meal is A239. And A stands for Alpha.
So there was Alpha, Beta, and Charlie. There were 3 companies, I believe.
It was Alpha, Beta,
and Gamma. That's right.
Gamma, yeah.
It was never Charlie, it was Gamma. That's right.
And the whole idea behind the Spartan 3s were, okay, so we're in the middle of the Covenant War, and the Spartans are extremely effective. Like, they are our ace in the hole when it comes to fighting the Covenant. But the thing is, they're expensive to make, and we keep losing them. So what O&I does, the Office of Naval Intelligence decides, let's try and make Spartans, but cheaper and more expendable, so we can like send a mass of them at once on a battlefield.
Wow.
Just kind of overwhelming the enemy at a point.
So they're built to be cannon fodder.
So they are quite literally.
Like cannon fodder. Wow. So you had like the first phase that was, you said it didn't really work out or something, or
it didn't work out because the augmentation didn't really fit. I mean, there are like very few Spartan 1s that were active, but to a degree, the program was a failure. And then Halsey said that's because they used it on adults and not kids. And then later on, the reason why they went back to that in the Spartan 4 program, but back to adult recruits, is because the augmentation process had advanced so much that they decided, hey, let's go back to that, because that way we can be 100% transparent with what these Spartans are. We just won't tell people where we got the idea for the program, but
because phase 2 already tested all the things and got it working. So on phase 3, they could use it on adults then.
No.
Well, phase 3 was still on children.
Phase 3 was still kids, because what they did with phase 3 is that they didn't replace the kids with flash clones, because what they did is they only took kids who were orphaned by the Covenant and said, hey, here's your chance at payback.
Exactly. And the difference between the 2s and another major difference between the 2s and the 3s, most of the Spartan 3s, they never even got armor. Only very specific Spartan 3s even got armor.
They got armor, but it wasn't like the high speed. It wasn't the Master Chief, because here's the thing. And this is a preview for the next comic, but I'll go into it right now. The armor that the Master Chief wears is called Mjolnir armor. Yes, named after Thor's hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Halo 1, he has the Mark V armor, which has like energy shields, motion trackers, and the like. It's basically very, very high-tech Iron Man armor. The ones the Spartan 3s were given is like pretty kind of the equivalent in comparison to Mjolnir. It's pretty much like duct tape armor. It's like barely protective at all, because remember, the 3s are designed to be cost effective. It was only a select few Spartan 3s, i.e. Noble Team from Halo Reach, that were given Mjolnir armor, because they figured we need like a high-speed SEAL Team 6 strike team that we can use.
Mm-hmm. And also, not only were just the special teams, but then they also had what were known as headhunters, even, that were just like 2 or 3 people going out to fulfill very dangerous missions behind enemy lines.
And the headhunters, which I believe was just 2 guys sent on a really impossible op, right?
The Headhunters was a story from the novel Halo Evolutions. And these 2 guys were sent on a mission to destroy, I believe it was Covenant batteries or something like that. Basically, bases.
Yeah, it was Covenant batteries, yeah.
That were crucial to winning that system. And so they were given armor and very experimental tech to complete their mission.
Yes. So the headhunters were basically like sending in 2 guys to accomplish a mission. Yeah, and in that story they did that. They also had a comic story because Dark Horse, they took over the Halo comics shortly thereafter, and they did a story where it's one headhunter going to assassinate a Covenant general. There's just one guy. It's designed to be small teams of guys that can operate behind enemy lines with no support, and basically say, okay, great, you survived. On to your next suicide mission. So you could say, welcome to the Suicide Squad, pretty much.
It really was quite that. It was almost impossible missions that if they succeeded, there wouldn't be...
On to the next one.
It would be on to the next one. No time for rest, no time for, stopping. It would just be keep going, keep going, keep going.
So in other words, lad, think about it as the Spartan 2s are the Justice League / Avengers, and the Spartan 3s are the Suicide Squad.
Wow.
To a certain degree. Yeah. So just imagine that growing up to... They were expendable. Yeah, except the only difference between the Spartan 3s and the Suicide Squad is that no one had a bomb implanted in their head.
I see. And so in Spartan 4, did the Spartan 4 program come out before the fall of Reach and stuff, or
no? That was like much late. That was like after the official end of the Covenant War, after Halo 3 is when they started the Spartan 3 program. Spartan programs 2 and 3 started. 2 started pre-Covenant War, 3 started in the middle of it.
Got it.
And 4 started post.
And 4 started post because post-Covenant War, we were essentially in a Cold War type of scenario where it was small. It wasn't like the entire Covenant against the entire UNSC. It was like small factions. It's kind of like we take out a general and warlords arise. That's kind of what that was.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's Fall of Reach. So, lad, what do you think of the Master Chief's totally bright and happy origin story?
Wow, that's gives Batman a run for his money, eh?
I know, right? Because I'm John.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
really
a very dark story. I mean, Halo isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, it is a dark story, and it is a very unhappy, unpleasant,
Oh,
very
Nick, it's so depressing.
just gritty story when you
Pitch
really
poor.
get down to
what
it.
a way to turn into a downer. Jeez.
I mean, but it really is, isn't it?
It really is, though. Yeah, it really is.
I mean, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. It is a dark story.
They're fighting an enemy that burns planets from orbit into glass balls.
Wow.
I mean, it is quite literally.
They actually call it glassing.
Dark. It really is, because they're pouring plasma beams onto the surface of the planet until the planet is reduced to nothing but glass.
One of the Covenant, here's another idea of how dark this is. One of the Covenant races, they're called brutes. If they capture you, they resort to cannibalism.
Oh.
They actually enjoy taking humans that they have captured from the battlefield, and they will, they'll keep you, but then they'll release you.
Oh, that's nice.
But not to be nice. They then choose to hunt you down as sport to prepare you for a feast.
A bit like this, lad. Remember that episode of Clone Wars where Ahsoka is captured by the Trandoshans?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Whoa. Man.
And we'll get into the individual Covenant races in our next episode. But you had a question, lad?
Did I have a question? I think I was going to start asking more questions about it, because this is all super cool, interesting. Learning about this Halo
Go ahead. We
lore.
have time. We have time. Go ahead.
But I was probably gonna start getting into like the games and such, and like in the overall story lore. It might be needed for like a separate episode.
That's gonna have its own episode. That's gonna have its whole episode, because that is really broad.
Yeah, to start diving into all of that. But from what I understand, in the Fall of Reach, did most of the Spartans die in the Fall of Reach, or did some of them
Most
survive?
of the twos died.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Reach was a massive. Humanity really wanted to keep Reach because Reach is basically the military's center for.
Not only that, lad. Reach is, if they find Reach, it's a straight shot to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
They find Earth, they find humanity's homeworld, which is,
which is why
that's pretty deep.
Which is why early in the Covenant War, they established what's called the Cole Protocol, which basically is if you encounter a Covenant ship, before you engage said Covenant ship, you have to destroy your ship's AI and you have to wipe out your ship's navigation data so the Covenant can't find Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
navigation
if you don't do that, it's an act of treason, punishable by death.
It really is. It is quite literally like if you're gonna have a golden rule that if you break, you are like the worst of the worst. That is, I mean, if you don't do that, you're basically handing Earth to this alien race that wants to wipe out all of humanity. You're handing it to them on a silver platter at that point.
Wow. So have we seen Earth in like the Halo games or books
Halo
or
2.
comics? Halo 2.
Halo 2.
Yeah, Halo 2 is when they first invade.
And 3.
And 3, but the first time
was 2, yes.
Yeah, the first time the Covenant find Earth, which is totally by accident, by the way, is Halo 2.
Oh boy! Wow,
because what they did, they found a Halo ring, and then on the Halo ring was the coordinates for Earth. Believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Because there is a very important quote unquote relic location that leads to a very important place in the story is located on Earth, which is why there is that location in this database on the Halo ring.
I see.
Yeah, it's really crazy, really crazy. But yeah, so that's basically that's part one of the 3-part story, which we are going to cover again we're gonna do because the way I do this, Logan, is that we do 2 Marvel and 2 DC episodes. So next week is going to be part 2, which is going to talk about the beginning to middle of the Covenant War, and the last one is going to talk about up until Halo 1 starts.
Okay.
And and hopefully, obviously, Logan, you are invited to come on and talk about it with us. We'd love to have you again.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back. This has been a blast to do.
It's nice to not be the only one talking about lore. My throat's not sore.
Yeah, I think you guys did a really good job of discussing.
But yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, 100%. And hope you all enjoyed the episode, Lad, Logan. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Fun time.
Oh yeah.
All right, stay heroic, everyone.
Yep. See ya.